Everyone is sick of the mainstream media, right? Yeah, me too. But you know what I'm really sick of? The Gulf Stream media. Who are the Gulf Stream media? They're these seemingly small grassroots influencers. Maybe they have a fancy set, maybe it's just a black screen behind them. And they maybe have lights that make them look a little bit too shiny. They have the veneer of independence because they look like kind of the Christian bookstore knockoff version of the real news, which, to be fair, like, I'm not in the bag for mainstream media. They're literally controlled by the rich. Particularly in Canada, we have Global, who's owned by Chorus, aka the Shaw family. We've got City TV, which is owned by Rogers, and we have CTV, who's owned by Bell. Literally, all the news in Canada outside of the CBC is owned by a phone provider. And it's shocking that somehow all the news stations always seem to think that anyone talking about lowering taxes for the rich is good. So how about these independent media shows that you find online? Are they truly independent? Well, yeah, some media is independent, and you get this scrappy person who, they're making a go of it with either ad revenue, or maybe they get some sponsorships, or maybe they have a fan base that's very readily willing to part with some of their money. You see that with things like the Majority Report, or with streamers like Hassan Piker. If you watch Canadian independent media that isn't funded by the oil and gas industry, you've probably found Steve Boots, who I believe is still on sabbatical from his day job as a teacher, but who seems to be trying to pivot into doing independent media full time. And, great for him if he can pull it off. For me, who's funding me right now? EI. My vocal cords were damaged in early December, and for a while I couldn't talk at all. They started to get better right around the time of the inauguration. They're still not good enough that I can do a full 8 hours of frequent talking, but I can talk enough to do little videos on the internet. And doing these short videos has helped with my mental health and rehabbing my vocal cords. At least, I think it's helping. There's another side to independent media, though. Look at a channel like The Daily Wire. They have 3 million subscribers, roughly equivalent to a channel like The David Pakman Show. But it's pretty clear The Daily Wire has way more cash than David Pakman does. The Daily Wire can afford to produce not actually funny American adult animation that feels like a Family Guy knockoff. And that shit is not cheap to make, though it is shit. If you look at something like the Majority Report in Tim Pool has a frickin' compound, but they've got pretty similar YouTube subscriber numbers. Now, am I saying that Sam Cedars in the poorhouse? I really don't know what his finances are, but he doesn't give off I can afford a skate compound vibes. In fact, we know for sure that there's certain parts of independent media that were caught taking huge swaths of money through Tenet Media to parrot Russian talking points. We know that that happens. But the only thing that surprised people when that story broke wasn't that supposed independent voices were all on the take. It was just that the money was coming specifically from Russia, because everybody knows that these people are getting paid on the side. Normally, the people who are funding these independent media groups, they're just industry groups. Now, if you could dig into the accounting of these influencers, you probably wouldn't see direct payments from companies like Suncor. But what you would find is payments done through industry lobbying groups, which is, for whatever reason, totally legal. And as far as I can tell, there's no requirements that anyone need to tell you that, you're listening to the supposedly Canadian independent media show brought to you by these three big oil companies. Basically, if a company pays for lobbying, they are buying lip service from influencers who are not telling you who's paying their bill. I know that everything is always presented to you like there's two sides, and some people are always going to be conservative and some people are always going to be liberal. But that's really not how it is. I'm someone who is only not sliding deeper into debt because of a government program that is taking care of me while I heal. I am someone who has a history of volunteering with nonprofits for the purpose of, though not always succeeding, to try and make the world a better place. There is a reason that I am fighting against policies and politicians who hurt the vulnerable. If you've watched much of my content, you may not see my face, but it should be pretty clear to you why I devote several hours a day to making content for the audience that I'm building on TikTok, and nobody's watching when I post it on YouTube. The question I'd like you to ask yourself, and ask your conservative friends and family members when they send you these videos that, of course, they're going to send you. What reason would someone have to build a faux studio in their basement and devote huge amounts of time, not just to filming, but to getting guests and paying a full-time editor? Because let's be honest, these people do not look like they have a clue how to use Final Cut, Premiere, or Resolve. I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, feel free to be skeptical of mainstream media all you want, especially from newspapers that look like they're Canadian owned but are all owned by Post Media, which is an American company. But don't assume that just because an awkward person who's shinier than they should be is on YouTube or another platform on a semi-janky set, that they're not beholden to the exact same people that news anchors at major studios are.